Are Dragon Ball Xenoverse, Kakarot, Heroes, GT, Fighters, and even Fusions all canon? In the world of Dragon Ball, there are many implications of a much deeper lore. Many pieces of material explaining the nature of many things that we don't understand in the cosmology. The questions that we need answered have already been addressed in these stories, and yet there's people who do zero research and don't know anything about Dragon Ball beyond the anime and the manga, flagging these stories as quote-unquote non-canon. But what if I told you that all of your favorite fights from every single Dragon Ball iteration are objectively canon to the main continuity of Dragon Ball Super? I'm about to change your entire perspective of what you thought was true regarding Dragon Ball as an entirety. But before we dive in, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a video, and so that YouTube recommends my channel to more people, which really helps out with my actual life. I'm a college student with no time for an actual day job, so this is kinda my career. Now without further ado, let's get on with the video. First off, we need to define the term canon in of itself. What does it mean to be canon? Well, a canon work of fiction is the body of works taking place in a particular fictional world that are widely considered to be official or authoritative, especially those created by the original author or developer of the world. Essentially, any official work of fiction under the name of a certain franchise and is recognized under that authority is objectively canon to that work of fiction, either directly or by extension. So even if you want to argue that they aren't even the main continuity, they are still canon by extension of being alternate timelines, which is what most reasonable Dragon Ball fans agree to. But my premise is to prove that they exist not as alternate timelines, but in the main continuity of Dragon Ball Super. Let's start off with the Dragon Ball game, since many people seem to think that for some reason a game that is literally made based off of the franchise somehow isn't canon. For starters, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot plays a very important and crucial role in proving that every other Dragon Ball game is canon, because Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is the only Dragon Ball game that has been hammered home directly as being canon to the main continuity, even in public statements by Akira Toriyama himself and his staff members. For example, it's been verbatim stated by Akira Toriyama that Dragon Ball Z Kakarot tells us stories that haven't been told in the original manga, and is an expanded version of the manga itself. And this is stated multiple times, even double downing on that by saying it shows never before seen moments in Dragon Ball and explains the Dragon Ball lore and answers burning questions about the franchise. Essentially, the moments we see in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot that aren't seen in the anime or manga are basically extended stories that Toriyama wanted to add, which have been made canon to the main continuity via Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Toriyama even helped him work on the game, and it's stated to be faithful to the anime and the manga. Now, if all that doesn't convince you, how about Dragon Ball Super literally using clips from the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot game itself as a part of his history in the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie? Or Dragon Ball Z Kakarot using clips from original Dragon Ball as a part of its history? Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is objectively canon to both Z and Super, and arguing against it is just intellectual dishonesty, because you'd be arguing against the word of Toriyama himself, as well as heavy implications of its canonicity to the main continuity. Now I want you to keep something in mind. The part where it says it explains stories that have never been seen before, an expanded version of the manga, Dragon Ball lore, yada yada yada, because it'll be important later. So that's one down, and let's get on to the next part of the video, which is proving the canonicity of Dragon Ball Xenoverse. Now, what if I told you that Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 is directly canon to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot? Well, if we can prove that Dragon Ball Xenoverse is directly canon to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, then you undoubtedly prove that it's canon to the main continuity of Dragon Ball Super without a doubt. You don't really need Dragon Ball Z Kakarot to do this, which I'll explain later, but for now, let's explain why you can use Dragon Ball Z Kakarot to prove that Dragon Ball Xenoverse is canon to the main continuity. I think you can kind of see a pattern forming here, because when you prove that this game is canon to this game, which is canon to the main continuity, the aforementioned game would be canon by extension. Now, if you really paid attention while playing Dragon Ball Xenoverse, you would notice that the avatar that you created constantly travels to the main continuity of Dragon Ball Super. This is because we see multiple instances where Goku remembers the Avatar who visited him at multiple points in history within the exact same continuity, implying it's the exact same Goku. And this is also because the Avatar was not just going to multiple alternate timelines, but he was going to save the Z Fighters at multiple points in history in the same timeline / continuity. This isn't to say that the Avatar doesn't go to alternate timelines though, he does. And the reason I say it's the main continuity of Dragon Ball Super is because of the multiple instances within the DLCs of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 where it stated that the characters within said DLC packs came straight from Dragon Ball Super itself to join the fight. This is in context to the fact that the characters that the Avatar goes to help at multiple points in history are in fact from the Dragon Ball Z and Super continuity, and these DLC characters are going to the same timeline of the Time Patrol, which similarly to Dragon Ball Online is in an era far beyond the current age of Dragon Ball, but they still go to the current age. This is important because within the Buu saga in Dragon Ball Xenoverse, Goku and the Avatar manage to defeat Mira, who Towa then obtains the defeated Mira as a cell. This same Towa, who was just in the main continuity of Dragon Ball Xenoverse, is then seen in the main continuity of Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, gathering energy to restore Mira from that same cell state. This shows that the events within Dragon Ball Xenoverse and Dragon Ball Z Kakarot are canon to each other, making Dragon Ball Xenoverse and its events canon to the main continuity by extension, since we already established that Dragon Ball Z Kakarot in of itself is canon. It's not uncommon for Dragon Ball games to be directly linked with each other or being in the exact same timeline, as Dragon Ball Breakers is in the exact same timeline as Dragon Ball Heroes, and this is also interestingly the case for Dragon Ball Heroes, which I'll get into later. So this basically means Kakarot Goku is Xenoverse Goku, and by proxy is Super Goku. They're all the exact same person. Want even more evidence of Dragon Ball Xenoverse being canon? How about the fact that it's stated that Toyotaru draws the Dragon Ball Xenoverse manga, as well as he and Akira Toriyama being credited as the authors of the Dragon Ball Xenoverse manga itself, with a message from Akira Toriyama even stating on the manga cover that Toyotaru has taken up the mantle of drawing Dragon Ball, and he still contributes the basic story and ideas, but Toyotaru draws and brings the Dragon Ball universe to life. Why would they put this on the Xenoverse manga if this statement didn't apply to it and it wasn't canon? And I know some people will be like, oh, but Drip Sauce, that's the manga, not the game. Well, unfortunately for you Dragon Ball down players and haters, it's verbatim stated by the staff who created the game Dragon Ball Xenoverse that Akira Toriyama was very well aware of the game and gave them plenty of freedom to develop the game under his supervision, as well as the addition of new characters like Toki Toki and Chronoa, the Supreme Kai of Time. With everything I've said regarding Dragon Ball Xenoverse connection to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, which we proved was objectively canon, as well as Akira Toriyama's involvement, as well as Toyotaru, and the other things I mentioned previously, I think this solidly places Dragon Ball Xenoverse as objectively canon to the main continuity by extension. And even while playing the game itself, there's literally nothing that contradicts it being canon. Oh, but Drip Sauce, the events don't match up with Dragon Ball Super. There's many things that happened in Xenoverse that aren't shown in Dragon Ball Super. Not only would this just blatantly be an appeal to ignorance, but remember when I said to keep in mind that it would be important later at the fact that the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot states that it explains the backstories that have never been seen or told in the anime or manga, and explains the lore of Dragon Ball with never before seen moments, yada yada yada? Yeah. Since Xenoverse is canon to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot directly, those statements would apply to Dragon Ball Xenoverse by extension, so there's zero cause for alarm. The main plot of Dragon Ball Xenoverse as a game is about restoring Dragon Ball's history to its original form. Towa and Mira are messing with history, so they find a new revolutionary way to play Dragon Ball games where you just don't play as a Dragon Ball character, but as you. You are a canon character in Dragon Ball since you are helping to protect Dragon Ball's history, which is why the concept of Dragon Ball Xenoverse and Heroes is extremely revolutionary in the Dragon Ball gaming industry. Within Dragon Ball Xenoverse, you travel into the main continuity to correct the history by helping Goku and the gang win fights against villains that they ordinarily would lose against, because Towa and Mira travel through time and buff the villains with the evil energy, which makes it impossible for Goku and the gang to win at that level of power. What you do is, since you're substantially more powerful than Goku and the gang at each point in time, you visit them and you help them win the fights that they won according to the regular history, so history can continue with its original flow. It's just the same as Goku, who was supposed to win against Frieza on Namek, suddenly having to fight an even more powerful Frieza due to Towa and Mira jumping through time and trying to change history by buffing Frieza, but you come in and fight with Goku and help him win like he's supposed to, which in turn makes history flow the way it's supposed to. And then you disappear immediately after the fight is over, so Goku and the gang forget you were ever there, which is why in Resurrection F, Goku stated that he felt as if it wasn't the first time he was being held by the Avatar, and in Universe 6 Saga, Goku blatantly remembers the Avatar as a friend. This is the only thing that changes in the history, and it doesn't contradict the story of Dragon Ball whatsoever, and all that changes is that Goku now sees you as a friend and has you in his memory in the current canon Dragon Ball Super timeline. So please don't ignore the narrative implications regarding Dragon Ball Xenoverse. The lobby we see in Dragon Ball Xenoverse is not the main timeline. What they do is they travel into the main timeline to correct history wherever it's been altered, as I've stated earlier. Dragon Ball Xenoverse is canon to the main continuity. Even without using the argument that it's canon to Kakarot, you can still easily argue that it's canon via the aforementioned points I made about Xenoverse. I put a lot of effort into this research I made regarding each of these games, so you can prove they are canon independently of each other, and having them alongside each other just makes your argument and scaling smooth like butter. Now we have two different games down which have been proven to be objectively canon, and this is not debunkable. Like, you cannot, and I repeat, you cannot debunk any of this. It's not debunkable. It's an objective fact. Deal with it. Super Goku scales to every feat in Xenoverse, period. Now let's talk about the more controversial one, Super Dragon Ball Heroes. Super Dragon Ball Heroes is a promotional anime made for the game Dragon Ball Heroes, which essentially is a card game where characters from Beats World worship the Dragon Ball characters as heroes and play them in an arcade game called Dragon Ball Heroes. Essentially, Beats gets sucked into the world of Dragon Ball, where he takes on the identity of a descendant of Goku as his avatar, and his friends take on the identities of other races as well. Firstly, we address the reasons people think it isn't canon, then we prove why it is canon. One of the main reasons people think that Dragon Ball Heroes cannot be canon to Dragon Ball Super is that it has multiple instances where Goku remembers the characters from the movies, and since this happens, we know that there are many contradictions within the movies occurring within the main continuity, and the fact that Toriyama once made a statement about the movies being an alternate timeline, it would inherently make Dragon Ball Heroes non-canon. But what if I told you that there was actually a way around this? Firstly, you need to understand that this statement made by Toriyama was made way before the existence of Dragon Ball Heroes, so the movies being non-canon could easily just have been retconned. But the thing is that Toriyama states that he takes the movies as occurring in a different dimension from the main story, not that they do take place in a different dimension, which is why he says that he's entirely just an audience member for them. But this isn't in context to him not working on the movies, therefore just means someone who waits for people to make it, then watch it himself as an audience member, as he quite literally admits to working on the movies in the exact same scan. So him saying he's just an audience member is in reference to him not solidly believing that the movies are in fact an alternate timeline, but as an audience member, you can choose what is canon to the main continuity in your mind, which is a similar concept to what he did with Dragon Ball GT, but not quite the same. Also, just because plot holes exist in the movies doesn't inherently mean that they can't be canon. That would just be bad writing from the staff. Human errors can exist, and obviously they aren't going to think of every single thing when making the series. Plot holes exist in the canon Dragon Ball Z and Super timeline as well, like the fact that Piccolo states that as seconds pass in the hyperbolic time chamber in the Buu saga, hours are passing in the living world, which Buu does confirm as he escaped to the living world after screaming out of the hyperbolic time chamber. but according to what we know, shouldn't days or weeks pass because a whole year is compared to a day in the hyperbolic time chamber. So the math ain't mathin'. And this isn't even close to the amount of plot holes in Dragon Ball, bruh. But this isn't a plot hole video, so you can just go watch many videos showing plot holes in a Dragon Ball we already consider canon. So the existence of plot holes in movies doesn't necessarily mean they aren't canon. So sorry, Mr. Dragon Ball University guy, it seems you didn't study properly and you didn't graduate. So once again, movies are canon. They just have plot holes. Dragon Ball Heroes takes place directly after the events of the Tournament of Power, and this is evident as we see people like Caulifla, Kale, and even Jiren, who even asks Goku and Vegeta why they didn't use fusion in the Tournament of Power. Now, there's also a scan where it stated that the Trunks we see in Dragon Ball Xenoverse transcends time and space to go to Dragon Ball Heroes, which is just a fancy way of saying that Trunks used a time machine or perhaps age from the Supreme Kai of Time to go from his reality to the main continuity. Or maybe he just flew there. XD. This isn't saying that Dragon Ball Xenoverse views Dragon Ball Heroes as a different timeline, as some people have been led to believe. Even more evidence of Dragon Ball Heroes being canon is in the official Dragon Ball Battle Hour, where it stated that Goku from the Dragon Ball Super anime and Xeno Goku and his allies like Xeno Trunks, Pan, Vegeta now have a combined multiverse where they can fight at the same time. Heck, we even see them fight each other in the Super Space Time Tournament, where Dragon Ball Super / Kakarot / Xenoverse Goku beats Xeno Goku in a 1v1. This same Goku who fights and beats Xeno Goku, which is literally stated to be Super Goku from the anime, remembers Xeno Goku, saying he'd fought him before, but the only time that's ever happened was when CC Goku fought Xeno Goku at the beginning of the Dragon Ball Heroes anime, which means that CC Goku clearly is Super Goku. In fact, the term CC Goku isn't even his official name. It's a fan-made name. It's just Goku from the main continuity. They include Goku and the gang in these games so they can sell more. I mean, it's literally made by the same staff who made Dragon Ball Super, which is why the animation is exactly like Dragon Ball Super animation. Another argument is that Hearts was hyping up Gogeta to be equal to Zeno, which is just extremely funny and just the power of the universe seed getting into his head and simply comparing Gogeta to how strong he thinks Zeno is. Now here's the thing that puts the nail in the coffin. The thing that objectively without a doubt proves that Dragon Ball Heroes is the main continuity. We know that we already proved and established that Dragon Ball Xenoverse is canon to the main continuity via being directly canon to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, and even independently without Dragon Ball Z Kakarot can still be proven as canon. But what if I told you that the official staff member in charge of every Dragon Ball game project development, Mr. Hirano, states that Dragon Ball Heroes exists in the same timeline as Dragon Ball Xenoverse, and not just that, but he states that it is not strange for two different Dragon Ball games to come forth from the same continuity. And he states that Dragon Ball Heroes and Xenoverse have the same premise, which is playing from the perspective of your own avatar and not from a Dragon Ball character, which was a revolutionary concept that popularized Dragon Ball games in general. I mean, who doesn't like having your own fully customizable canon character helping Goku and the others fight in the main continuity, making your character objectively canon? It's a very interesting concept because it makes you feel like you're a part of Dragon Ball, which is the premise of Dragon Ball itself, which is to provide entertainment and enjoyment to the readers. He also states that people who have never played Dragon Ball Xenoverse can enjoy Dragon Ball Heroes, and this is because they share the same universe, so it's still playing an amazing game regarding Dragon Ball. He also states that people who play Dragon Ball Xenoverse can see it as something new, and this is in context of the fact that Heroes has an entirely new game mechanic, which involves the strategic use of cards to play the game. So yes, Dragon Ball Heroes is objectively the main continuity of Dragon Ball Super, and CC Goku is Super Goku. It's not uncommon for multiple Dragon Ball games to share the exact same timeline. This is shown in the fact that Dragon Ball Breakers shares the exact same universe as Dragon Ball Xenoverse, as I've said earlier. So that's also canon. The developers usually do this so they can advertise the different games across each other, and also because it's a fun idea. And as a supervisor and the head of the staff and developer of Dragon Ball games in general, Mr. Hirano states, there is nothing strange about it. It's actually even stated that Dragon Ball Heroes spans across original Dragon Ball to Z, GT, and even Super. So So anything you see relating to this game is in reference to the actual continuities. It's really sad that Dragon Ball Heroes got a lot of hate simply because it was viewed as non-canon, when we literally get to see things that normally wouldn't be shown in the quote-unquote main continuity, like Kunber, an ancient evil Saiyan who somehow knows about the history of Super Saiyan God, which could provide some interesting lore about the Saiyans, or Super Saiyan 3 Raditz, or Super Saiyan 4 Bardock, Super Saiyan 3 Rose, which literally looks like it came out of one of those Dragon Ball fan mangas or games. We even got to see a Kaioken Vegito. We got to see more of Goku using Ultra Instinct and Mastered Ultra Instinct. Goku having some kind of Force Spirit Fission when he punches through Kemen and Orin. We get to see Goku training with the Grand Priest, which is insane. We see more of the cosmology, the timeness, the crack of time. We get to see all 12 gods of destruction casually fly from their universes to Universe 7 using the same way the angels fly, which I've been saying for years. Beerus doesn't need Whis to travel, he just does it for convenience. Honestly, Dragon Ball Heroes is peak, and we as Dragon Ball fans should embrace it. It's basically the continuation of Dragon Ball Super in the anime right after the Tournament of Power. Of course, these events fall into the category of side stories that weren't shown in the manga, as explained by Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, since it's canon to it by extension, and these points about Heroes in general should just solidify the fact that it's canon, and no, Xeno Goku does not beat Super Goku or Zeno, nor does he solo all of Dragon Ball Super. In fact, he already objectively lost that fight to Super Goku, XD. Speaking of Xeno Goku, let's talk about Dragon Ball GT. How is Dragon Ball GT canon? Is it the main continuity? Does it occur after Dragon Ball Super? Or is it simply just an alternate timeline? And the biggest question of all is Xeno Goku really just GT Goku? First of all, Akira Toriyama actually had involvement with Dragon Ball GT, but note that he does state that GT is just a side story but can be taken as the end of Dragon Ball Z if you love it. However, the fact that you can choose whether or not you can consider it the end of Dragon Ball Z means that Toriyama already intended to make his own ending to Dragon Ball Z, which we know is Dragon Ball Super, and GT is then set as an alternate timeline, an alternate ending to Dragon Ball Z. So you have Dragon Ball Z timeline as an example, and then the timeline can split into two, where one part leads into the Dragon Ball Super anime and the other part leads into Dragon Ball GT. This is why Dragon Ball Super's current canon age is age 774, while GT is in age 889, because it's not in the same timeline objectively. Even the Dragon Ball display board that depicts the Dragon Ball timeline shows the movie version of Battle of Gods, which isn't canon as we know to the main continuity, as the anime version is almost completely different, and this movie version happens in age 784, which is far beyond even the current age of Dragon Ball Super being age 774. Even so, this doesn't inherently mean GT is canon to the movie version either, because simply being placed in a set of time that comes chronologically after the age of the movie version doesn't mean that it comes after the movie version in the same timeline, as it's just placed in a set of time that's after the specific period, but not necessarily being a part of the same timeline, just like Trunks' reality is set in a world 17 years from the main continuity is right now, but isn't a direct continuation to the main continuity. But personally, I would say that GT should be canon to at least the movie version, which is actually implied by Dragon Ball Heroes, which I will explain. Everything in the board came before the creation of Dragon Ball Super. That board existed before Dragon Ball Super was even a thing. So to argue that it's in context to Dragon Ball Super is being intellectually dishonest. Even this Chozenshu page references only the movie variant, which is before Dragon Ball Super even existed. In fact, the Chozenshu page itself was created before Dragon Ball Super existed. The movie itself isn't even a part of Dragon Ball Super. It's stated to be Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods. There's a reason why a Super variant exists. Even the statement that they're trying to direct Dragon Ball into the original Dragon Ball Z ending doesn't in any way imply GT, because simply stating it's the original Z ending doesn't mean that it's talking about the end of Z in reference to GT. There's way too many contradictions for GT being canon to the main continuity, like the fact that the Pilaf gang still hate Goku and are still old as shit. If GT is just 1 year away, then this shouldn't be the case. Shin and Kibito are are still fused in GT. 17 is evil in GT. Not to mention the multitude of times within Dragon Ball Xenoverse where GT is directly addressed as its own additional reality, usually called the timeline where Baby was, or the timeline where the Shadow Dragons rule. Even the parallel quests depict GT as a separate timeline. Dragon Ball Heroes makes it clear that Xeno Goku, who is from a GT timeline, or quite possibly the GT timeline, is a separate Goku from a different dimension, which is actually supported by the statement of Heroes spanning through all of the Dragon Ball iterations, including GT. And it's also consistent with the Dragon Ball Heroes game being stated to perfectly recreate events from Dragon Ball GT, with it being stated that these what-if stories that you'd never expect to happen are exclusive to Dragon Ball Heroes. This is also consistent with the fact that Xeno Goku only fought Lord Beerus as a Super Saiyan God, but never trained with Whis to gain Super Saiyan Blue, but was able to infuse divine energy into his Super Saiyan 4, creating a form known as Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4, and it's also somewhat supported by the fact that GT Goku is stated to be like a god, or had become nothing short of a god, or the fact that the way to recharge a Super Saiyan 4 in GT is literally the same way they recharge the Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 in Dragon Ball Heroes, which runs off of God Ki, which is very similar to the Super Saiyan God ritual, more so an incomplete variant. So maybe they adapted it to Xeno Goku in Heroes because it's supposed to be reminiscent of Dragon Ball GT, or is quite literally the same Goku from GT. Maybe that explains why Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta has red hair. Could he be a Super Saiyan God? Maybe the ritual can be completed in another way by absorbing energy from 4 pure-hearted Saiyans and then fusing with the 5th to create a Super Saiyan God-ish. Maybe that explains why Gogeta's aura was different and looked a little bit like divine energy, only with the old Z animation. This theory also explains why in a parallel quest, which is just a separate timeline in Dragon Ball Xenoverse, Kid GT Goku actually remembers Lord Beerus as a character dialogue between the two if you choose Lord Beerus as one of the characters on your team. Beerus also talks about how Super Saiyan 4 is different from his God form. Note that he doesn't talk about Blue or MEY, and this may be due to the fact that choosing Dragon Ball Super Beerus in this parallel quest somehow turns him into Beerus as if he was in Dragon Ball GT, or gives him the dialogue of Beerus from Dragon Ball ZT, or at least the one canon to the movie variant. It's also interesting because Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta in that parallel quest says, maybe I can win against Lord Beerus now, which may imply the loss that Goku had against Lord Beerus in the Battle of Gods movie variant. The only argument against Xeno Goku being GT Goku is that Xeno Goku is stated to be a hero from Trunks' memories that Colonel was summoned, and the original GT Goku had evolved to a higher plane of existence, basically the Dragon Realm. But however, this could just be in context to Konoha's time powers, summoning GT Goku from a point in history using Trunks' memory at least before Xeno Goku or GT Goku ascended to the Dragon Realm. You could also try to argue that it would be contradictory because Goku was at his strongest in GT when he ascended to the Dragon Realm. However, this could just be a plot hole in Heroes. As I explained earlier, human errors exist and writers don't actually always remember everything. Also, that concept of GT Goku being at his strongest is actually a scaling connotation, and when it comes to plot holes, the thing that writers generally forget are scaling connotations. They don't always remember everything. Also, whether or not Xeno Goku is GT Goku or just a version of GT Goku that's canon to the Battle of Gods movie in Heroes doesn't really matter. They're still both completely different Gokus, but it's still a very, very fun theory to think about. And oh yeah, they still lose to main timeline Goku. Well, that's all for GT. With that, let's get some honorable mentions. Do you know that God Broly from the real 4D Dragon Ball movie, you know, the one where Goku fused with the audience, which included Toriyama, which means that at his strongest he became his own author and could make himself as strong as he wanted due to his in real life author being a part of that fusion? That same God Broly that it took an IRL plus Goku fusion to beat is canon to Dragon Ball Heroes and has been fought many times. He's stated to be from a different timeline. Matter of fact, he's even stronger than he was in the real 4D movie in Dragon Ball Heroes, as he's able to achieve Super Saiyan 4, which would also mean that Z Broly is probably from the Dragon Ball GT timeline. Also, do you know that Dragon Ball Dokkan and Legends and Fighters are also connected with all of this and are also canon? There are multiple crossovers with the approved fan manga called Reborn as Yamcha and the Dragon Ball Super manga, as well as Dragon Ball Fusions and Heroes having a crossover. In fact, Dragon Ball Fusions quite literally stated that the Dragon Ball timeline was fused together, and not just random ass timelines, but the titles that are shown in the scans in context to things like the Dragon Ball Super manga, Reborn as Yamcha, Dragon Ball Fighters, Dokkan, etc. So with all these points that I have so gracefully bestowed upon you, it is now very easy to prove that CC Goku, Xenoverse Goku, Kakarot Goku are all the exact same person as Super Goku. So they are all canon objectively. And if you disagree with this video, just stop scaling in general. You literally just hate Dragon Ball for no reason. Or you're probably just paid to do it. Just quit, bro. Quit scaling Dragon Ball. We don't need you in the community. Now, I'm sure you're all happy that I made this video finally, and you're now very excited to slam people in debates, now saying shit like Super Goku slam Xeno Goku who beat Demigod the Transcended, yada 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 yada. Yeah, I can smell it already. But make me happy as well by subscribing to my YouTube channel and sharing this information to your friends and rivals, and also like the video and make sure to watch all the ads on my videos and join the membership to support my ministry even more. And don't forget to join the Discord server, which will be pinned in the description below. And don't forget to tell me your thoughts in the comment section. And remember, I debunk DC, and I'm also debunking Marvel as well, so be sure to look out for that. Alright, Drip Sauce out. Peace.